Hello and welcome to another ARCHLine.XP webinar. My name is Zoltán. Over here is, as always, our resident architect, Mr. Ildespa.
Hi there.
Today is all about numbers. We are going to look at how to create lists and schedules in ARCHLine.XP. Let's take a look. As always, I urge you to ask your questions on the right-hand side, where you can ask regarding all those things that we are going to show during today's session, which is going to be all about calculations. So let's share the screen and talk a little bit about this project that we have here, and in a few words, what we are going to discuss today.
The building itself that we use today is a multi-floor simple dwelling. It has 3 or 4 floors, but 2 out of them are just technical floors for drawings. And these are the real floors, the ground floor and the first floor. It has all the details that a classic design should have. I mean, all the doors, windows are in the architectural level. They are detailed enough for the sections and all the documentation. We will use this project to highlight and show you how the scheduling and the quantity takeoff in ARCHLine.XP works, and what's the difference between the two tools actually, and what's the goal of using either of those.
Let's start with the schedules. Can you show us what they are, what they do, and how you can use them?
Schedules are dynamic content. You can let's just show how they work first. You can find all the schedule tools in documentation, schedule, and the way you will place the schedule is placing the schedule, and then you just prepare the type of schedule that you would like to use. We will go deeper into this and talk about all the details. I'm just placing one now, so I just select the wall schedule and I just say OK, and then I just set up the formatting settings of this schedule. We will also talk about this a little bit later. I just use OK, and then when you see this sort of progress bar appearing at the bottom, it means it's just collecting the information in the project, and now you can just place it somewhere on your drawing. Now this is part of the drawing from now on. It is something that you can easily just print out and make the modification. For example, now I have something that I don't want to see in this list. I can just simply discard this and do it again. I just go and use the placing schedule again. I just apply all the settings, and now I can disable one of those rows that I don't want to see, and I just use the same thing and I just apply it again on the drawing. Now it's just again recollecting the information, and the same way it can be actually updated whenever you will change anything in your drawing. This schedule will be updated, but we will focus on that later. So what this schedule can do, as you can see, it contains all the information. Now it's grouped floor by floor, so we can see the first floor, the ground floor content. We created a list of walls, so we can see all the walls listed with their material, with their thicknesses and their areas. This area inside and outside means the internal and external surface of that wall surface. So this is what we can see here. Now if you select this schedule, you can see a few icons, we call them markers, appear. And as you can see, there are also numbers. These are actually the IDs, the identifiers of those specific walls. So if I'm curious what this wall means on the drawing, which wall this is, I just click on this finder icon, and then it highlights, it actually points to that wall. So I can see that, yeah, okay, we are talking about this wall. So if I select it on the 2D, let me just zoom here, I can see the same ID, and I can see that selected on the 2D and in the 3D, just as we used to do that.
So that's how we can backtrack elements from the list.
Yeah, so you can easily find, not just visually by just simply clicking on it, but other ways you can also easily find what sort of element you are talking about. And this applies, of course, all sort of other lists, as you will see during this session, not just for the walls, but all the others as well.
Perfect. So let's look under the hood, right, and see how it all comes together.
Yeah, well, just one thing before we go on. I just wanted to show you the directional connection between these two. So now I know that this wall specified here having this sort of setting, and if I select it, I can see actually these paint bucket icons. These are, for example, the finish face interior material for the 3rd row, which is this one. This is that wall, and if I click on that, I can actually not just check what the material what sort of material appears on that, but I can also click on that and see what happens. Now when you do that, as you can see, something is generated, and actually you can actually just change the values. We will show you another example regarding this as well, but this way you can have an impact on the drawing, changing values of the table in front of you.
So from the numerical value, you can reflect the changes back to your floor plan and your model.
Yes, and it works the other way around. We will talk about that.
Just 1 second before we go any further, can you just in a couple of words tell us how this is going to be different from what we showed before regarding the lists and Excel sheets?
The difference between this and the Excel sheets is that these are actually bidirectional. These have bidirectional connection. So as you saw, this makes the changes on the drawing, while when you will see, we will demonstrate it at the end of today's session. The Excel list is mostly for documentation and for extra calculation. Excel is very strong in those expressions and all sort of other things. So if you want that, you can actually turn a schedule also into an Excel table. We will show you at the end of this session.
So let's look under the hood. Let's see how we can define these kind of schedules. How do you put them together? What are the rules and what are the regulations on what you want to see?
Yeah, okay, so there is a difference between, as you can see, those are two different commands, the define and the play schedule. Play schedule means that you have already defined the schedule or you use the factory defaults and then you just use them. Defining a schedule means you actually set up the rules or at least you check the rules of any sort of specific schedule that you are about to use. Like, for example, I'm about to create a room and area schedule now, so I can also check the existing one, whether I like the content of it. Here at the center you can see the possibilities, and here at the right you see the schedule parameters. Actually, so if I'm about to use this room schedule, I will list all these information appearing here. So what if I'm about to create a new one? I just click on new, I just name it some way. Let's just name it room webinar, for example, and I just click OK. So it will give me an empty list, and now I can do whatever I want to do with that. I can just simply say that I'm about to collect information of the general properties of room and areas, and there will be something like, for example, I'm curious what floor that sort of specific room and area is, so I just add it to the list. And I do the same with the room name, actually. I do the same with the room number, and so this way I can just go through and select all these settings. Like, for example, I think I should add the floor finish, perhaps wall finish, ceiling finish, all those things are available here. So this is how you can assemble a list like that.
How can I add additional fields, for instance, some calculated values?
Well, there is, as you can see at the top, there is something called group. Now, parameters, available parameters are grouped together to general properties, calculated values, and those are all the specific IFC values here appearing over there. So you can just go through them and check what you have. And for example, now I'm about to, for example, collect information about gross area of this room and area. So I just went to calculated values, gross area, and I just click here. So now I have a new line here. Those lines are actually something that you can just change their order easily. You just select any of those and you just go up and down in the list. So this way you can select the kind of like the listing order. And also you can rename them. So let me just rename this, for example, to area or total area or something like that. If I hit enter, this is how it will appear in the list. And just as you saw before, if there is something that permanently or temporarily I don't want to use, I can just disable that. I use that for the style, so there is the visibility option as well. So now I created something called the room webinar schedule. It is stored in this specific type, this specific schedule type. So when I hit OK, I can actually use it by simply using the schedule and placing schedule tool. So I just click here, and then now if I go through the list and find room and area, I can see there is actually the original one, and I can see the room webinar which I created just now. And then when I hit OK, Yeah, sorry.
Before you place it, what are the other options to place it? Because I know that there are two ways to place a schedule.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to mention that there is this way, placing a schedule. I used it at the beginning, and you can also find those schedules at the end of the project navigator. There's the schedule. If it's closed, then you can just click on the little arrow to open that up. And you can see all the available schedules. And here in room and area, I have this room webinar here. So I can just click and drag it here, and the same way it appears. So now when I see this, I can select the options. I can decide how I would like to sort this. What is the rule for grouping the content that is about to be listed? Now in this case, I think it would be a nice idea to group the rooms floor by floor. So we will end up something similar with what we have here now. And also to do that, I just need to enable grouping by the floor. Here actually you can see all the rest that you have selected earlier, so you can select them. And then when you do that, the header and footer becomes available, so you can just enable these options and you can set up what will be the content of the footer. I will just use totals. I just would like to have summaries of values, and I just use the same for the grand totals, and this time I will use the title as well. If this project is phased, I mean it has an existing demolition and all sorts of other phases, we covered that in a previous session, then I can just use that. I'm not doing that because this is just a very simple project now. And then when I hit OK, I can just place it. Now at the top, let me mention, I'm collecting information of all the floors, not just the current floor. So that's why I will have this, floor by floor grouped list. So I just use OK. And then the same way, I can just place this list on my drawing. And here, there is a little difference of the content, of course, because this at the top appears different, and this at the bottom has all those information of the first floor, bathroom, bedroom, ground floor, and hall, and all sorts of other information. The room number is also appearing. I can see the floor finish because I have selected that, the ceiling finish, and the areas.
So the information is gathered here.
Yeah.
Now, question which might come up. This is something that you have showed us already, but how do we modify things here? Let me tell you why I'm asking that. There are several rooms with the same name here.
Yeah, for example, hall and hall.
We have 3 bedrooms, two halls. How do I change the names here, which would be reflected on the floor plan as well? So I don't want to change it on 2 different places.
Yeah, well, actually, when you select a schedule like this, if you select a schedule like this, you can easily find all those values that can be modified from within this selection. I mean, you will see this finder, this name appearing, the number, and all those other things appearing blue with the marker. That means those are not just static information, you can modify them. You cannot modify the floor information, but you can modify the name. So if you click on the name hall here, that means you can actually just rename it. I will just name it main hall, for example, or something like that. And then when I hit enter, I will see that, and now we are on the ground floor and we don't have that much room here. So I will find it easily. I could use this pointer here as well. So I can see there's main hall here. So I click here and the software will tell me that it's over there.
Very neat, yes.
So it's easy to find. Also, if something appears on a different level, now we are on the ground floor, and we have elements listed on the first floor as well. So if I'm curious what this bathroom is and where that is, ARCHLine actually will quickly jump to that floor and will highlight that information for you. It won't just point to that place because it's on another level, so it will just quickly jump there. So let me go back to the previous floor.
Makes sense. And what happens if you want to get a similar schedule for openings, doors and windows?
Well, if I would like to do that, I just go to the schedule, and I will either decide to use a ready-made schedule, or I can again define one. So I'm just using this one, the placing schedule, and I select a door list, and there is the same thing appearing. And now there is something that I would like to modify. I would like to highlight the IDs, for example, of these items, and I didn't create a door schedule with that information. So this is a reason why I can define my own schedule, or I can actually modify the current schedule. So I just select the door schedule, and I find that I have this door schedule without ID information. So now I make it selected, and then because it appears at the bottom, I will just quickly move it up to the top of this list, and then I would like to make it visible for sure. So I just hit OK, and now I have this door schedule. When I apply it, I just use the placing schedule, and I use the door schedule, and it's having this ID appearing here, just as you see. I just modified that, and then when I format the schedule, I should not forget to set up the proper grouping. Now, if you do that for the first time in your project, it might automatically fall back to the previously selected ID. So just make sure that you are selecting the proper item, the proper sorting list item that you would like to group this information with.
Before you place it, there's the setting called itemize every instance. When is that useful?
Well, this is useful in case of, for example, now we have a building with different windows, but many of those windows are actually kind of identical to each other. So if I disable this option, this is the default. If I disable this option, the software will summarize things, like it will say that I have a window with this specific size, but it has a number count 4, for example. But if I enable this option, I will just demonstrate this. So if I enable this option, and I say OK, and then I place it, I will have not too long list, but as you can see, all IDs are appearing here, and I can find all those windows piece by piece. I have quite a few appearing with the same size. So these are actually the same. So in this case, it is also useful to know that when you do place a schedule, and I just quickly repeat that, and then you disable this option, so keep it disabled, and when you say, okay, let me just make it sure it's all the floors sorted by the floor, all informations are enabled, and this is also something that I would like to use, so I just click OK. So now I place it. So now the list is shorter, and it's because of this. Because all those French door single items having this specific size are summarized with a counter here.
They are grouped together.
Yeah, they are grouped together. So what happens? How can I identify them? So if I click on the list, in this case, on the schedule placed on my drawing, I can see that those are having those finders, but these do not have. And it's because if you click on a finder, it finds one element. If it finds another one single element, but it cannot find all the elements. So in that case, there is another tool to find this specific window. So you can see that there is window 277. So which one is that? It's on the ground floor for sure. So I just use the selection menu. It's here. And I just use by properties, there is the ID finder built in, and you can just find ID 277 and OK. So it selects that. It works kind of in a similar fashion, but in this case, you can find them with this tool if there is no other way.
Naturally, two questions come up at this moment. What happens if you go back to your floor plan, you keep on designing things, and you have to move things around? Yep. How do you update your schedule? But let me turn this question upside down. How can you update things on the floor plan from your schedule? You have already shown this, but what happens with the dimensions and sizes? How can you change the numerical values which would reflect changes on the floor plan? Okay,
let's see both of these options. The first option is, just as you mentioned, what happens if I'm not satisfied with the size of this? Now I realize that these should be larger. So I just click on the list and I just edit this value. Those are actually the windows in front of us here, so we will be able to see them very well. So I just rewrite the schedule, the size of this window to something a little bit larger. So when I do that, it's actually just changing the scale, the size of these windows, and as you can see, those are enlarged on the drawing. So this is similar to when I change the wall surface, the wall texture. This is the same thing that you can do with the windows. So all values that you select and appearing in blue, or either with this little finder mark or with the paint bucket, you can change those values. Now let's turn this around and see what happens from the other side. So what is window or door 275? It's this one. So now we can see it appears with this specific value here in the list. So let me just make a change here. I just would like to make it a little bit wider, make this room a little bit more accessible. I just click on it, I just click on the value here, Let me just make it. Let me just make it 100 millimeters wider. So it's wider here. And now I go back to the drawing, and if I right-click here, this is the room list, and this is the door schedule.
Right,
yeah. So I just right-click here, and I say, okay, just update this schedule. So now it just recollects this information, and it rewrited this value. This was the value changing before. So now we have the value 760. It changed to 860. So now it's 100 millimeter wider. So this is how you can change that.
That's right. Now, what happens about managing the schedules that you are creating? Because now you have a few on the right-hand side. How do you treat them? How do you carry it from one project to the other? What do you do?
You mean, yeah, okay, so if you would like to carry these and make them accessible on this computer for all the rest of the projects, right? So in that case, if you would like to do that, you can just right-click, you can just find that schedule that you have just created, and you can right-click there, and you can find all the type of information, the type of commands that you can find there. You can even export it to make it exported, and then you can import it on another computer. And then you can, if you just click on Save as Global, this means you will make it accessible for all the projects on this computer. So in that case, you click on the Save as Global, and if you just made a mistake, you can just click on Delete. And there is one another setting here, which is called the Display in Window. This is rather interesting because it works in a similar fashion while you place it. So you see the same dialog appearing, the same sort of formatting options and so on. But in that case, it appears in a separate window. And the reason why it's good, it's a good thing, is we have dual monitors here, so I can just move it to the other screen. So I can just use it as I could use a drawing on the other screen. And also I can just click on this print icon, and I can just prepare a print. I just hit print. Now obviously I won't print it now because we can't run to the printer, but we have a printed copy here. So this way you can just print the final version, and so it appears like that. So you can manage this as a separate printed copy, or because this is part of your drawing, as we discussed this before, when you prepare the plot layout and when you use the plot layout tool, you can actually just organize these tables onto the plot layout, so it can be also part of the multi-page PDF that you generate with the print queue, for example, in ARCHLine, or you can handle it otherwise,
so
other than that as well.
They could be placed down onto the plot layout
yes,
as well.
Yes, because it is part of this specific drawing in front of us now.
Now, in the beginning, we started the discussion by comparing schedules to Excel lists.
Yeah.
So we want to know what the differences and similarities are. Before we answer that question, can you show us how to turn this dynamic schedule into a static Excel list? Yeah,
let me show this with this room schedule that I've created the type for. So if I click here and I use the, we call this a context menu. So if I use the context menu and I click on the Save to Excel, this is one way to do that. And there is another way, which is from the documentation, schedule, and save to Excel. In that case, you need to select, you have multiple lists, so you need to select that one that you would like to generate an Excel file out of. Now, the difference between the previously schedule and this one is not the content. The content is identical. The difference is that this is a one-way communication into Excel, and there's no information coming back. So if I just change the name of the room, it won't reflect any change on the drawing, and that's intended. That's how it's supposed to work, because this is for mostly for additional calculations. You will use the powerful tools of formulas of Excel to make all sorts of other calculations. If we talk about tiling lists or wall lists and all sorts of other lists that you can or schedules that you can generate out of as an Excel list, this is what you can do with all of those. So you can actually just convert that information, which was a schedule, into an Excel file.
For the comparison, now let's take this Excel, which was created from a room and area schedule. Yeah. Let's put it aside and create a similar Excel list, this time focusing on the areas. Yeah. So theoretically we create the same things, but now we are going to show you how these two platforms differ from each other. So let's again go into creating an Excel and take an Excel list of the rooms and areas.
Okay, so now instead of schedule, I will use the quantity takeoff. So I will use this Excel list option here. And the Excel list has a few options that you can go with: building information, interior information, tiling, it's just as I mentioned, and there's the room information here. That's something that will automatically go through your drawing. When I hit yes, it will just go through your drawing. It will find all those rooms and areas. It will try to gather and update them and try to gather the information, and then you can click and save it. I will just override the previous file. You can just click and save that information, and the difference is two things. One is the content, because this has multiple pages. And of course, as this is an Excel file, this is also a one-way information, one-way communication. So it is just coming from ARCHLine, and there is no information going back when I make any sort of change here. So this is again for calculation, for the final documentation. And talking about calculation, if I go to the space information, ARCHLine.XP actually demonstrates how those values were calculated. So this is also good for the documentation that you are about to create out of the rooms. And this is the dining room, the kitchen, and all sorts of other rooms are listed here. And there's one other thing that could be a question when we work with Excel files, and this, okay, now I have an Excel file, and we just learned that there's no information going back, but how can I find which is the dining room if I have a large apartment a large building with multiple apartments, and I designed that large building? In that case, you will find the ID appearing in all parts of this Excel list. So if you are curious what this ID, let me just write it down. I have a very bad memory. So it's just 5371. So I just go back to ARCHLine, and I just use the same tool. I just go and use the selection menu. I use the by properties, and there is ID, and I just use the value 5371 and enter, so it selects the dining room. Now, in this specific case, this is not a large project, but should you have 3 times larger project, it is a very useful thing, especially talking about doors, windows, and all sorts of other things that you will make an Excel list out of.
Just to recap, here's a question for you. In what kind of scenarios would you use the schedules, and for what purposes would you use the Excel lists?
Well, all scenarios where you want to have this bidirectional connection within the information, I mean between the information and the content, you will use schedules. And you can at any time convert those schedules into Excel files that you can archive, that you can use for any sort of other calculations. If you, for any reason, do not need this bidirectional connection, but you need those a little bit more detailed Excel files with all the formulas inside and all sorts of details that you just saw in this room and area Excel file I created before, then you will use the quantity takeoff tool. Those are kind of similar, a little bit overlapping each other, but for 2 different purposes.
Yes.
One is for scheduling and making changes bidirectional. One is explicitly for just making calculations and extract information in a way like you cannot do other than that.
Perfect. That's basically what we wanted to share with you during this discussion of the ARCHLine.XP schedule and list elements. As always, this is not the end of the story. We are going to keep on producing these webinars, and let's talk about what happens next week. Next week is all about, we go back to visualization again. We take one step back to creating something beautiful and immersive. We talk again about ARCHLine.XP Live, but this time we are going to look at how it can be used for architectural visualization. Bunch of new things will be demonstrated, and we'll see how a bigger project comes to life thanks to the effects and the textures and objects we have in ARCHLine.XP Live. So that's what we wanted to discuss today. Thank you very much for your attention. Hope to see you next week for another discussion on the ARCHLine.XP Live feature set. Thank you very much for your attention. See you next week.
See you next week. Goodbye.